Are you a critter? I bet you only crit on a 20, don't you? Wait, it's for how much? Times 4? I am so sorry, I did not know who I was talking to. Hey everybody, it's me, the system reference dork. Man, this video it's really getting away from me already, isn't it? A few weeks ago, I put out a video trying to introduce new critters to various D&D YouTube channels across the community. However, D&DTube is actually a very big community, and there are a lot of channels that I either didn't know about or couldn't fit into the video. However, thanks to the community for pooling their knowledge, I now have a second list of even more fantastic creators for you to follow. The perk of doing a second video like this is that most of the big channels are already out of the way, and so we can spend the majority of this video going through those small and medium creators that didn't quite get enough airtime in the first video. So that makes this the Critters Guide to YouTube Part 2, the creators you haven't heard, and in which I also am legally required to not forget Jocat. It's a bit of a, it's a working title. However, a reminder that D&D YouTube is a gigantic platform and there is no way that I can even represent the majority of YouTubers in one or even two lists. If one of your favorite channels is not in this video, then I recommend you take it down into the comment section below and let your fellow viewers know so that your favorite can get a little bit of love too from the community. So just to make sure that in case you're watching this one and you haven't watched the part 1, I'll give you the same little disclaimer. This list does not contain actual play content or streaming content for the most part, so that stuff will all be put in a separate list. So if you're wondering why things like Dimension 20 aren't on these lists, that would be why. However, preemptively for my follow-up video, if you have any streamers or actual play podcasts or anything that you would like me to cover in my inevitable streamer's guide, then please make them known in the comments down below and I'll check them out. So please make sure you take use of the timestamps if you're not up for watching the whole video. I understand that these things are pretty long and not everyone's got the time or the willingness to sit through my rambling for a whole half hour. So because I'm not the star of this video, I'm gonna try and be pretty brief with my call to action. I'm William SRD. I try and make content that entertains an RPG audience, so it's mostly variety content. And I also have a series in which I cover the ancient role-playing games that were played in the actual Renaissance and the medieval age. I have a video in about 2 weeks covering a role-playing game system that was invented and played by the Bronte siblings as children. Yes, those Brontes. So please subscribe if you're interested in any of that stuff. Okay, let's kick things off with a category of video makers that I wasn't even aware existed for my last video. I'm a person who has hands. You wouldn't know it if you've seen me draw anything or if you've seen me try and create anything for a tabletop asset. You brandish your weapons and harden your hearts in preparation of fighting the great red drake before you. And yet, your bravery will do you no good, for with a great colossal flapping of wings, a second drake crashes down beside the first. Okay, you know what? You are gonna have to suspend your disbelief a little bit.
Gray stones are kind of boring, so I made a set of blue ones.
Behold, black magic craft. In fact, don't just behold it. Rub your eyeballs on this channel, because literally everything it shows you is beautiful. I'll admit, I am not super well versed on the crafting community and what people who are in that hobby like in a crafting channel, but I'll tell you what I like about Black Magic Craft. In addition to the fact that I obviously love the cinematography. I like the cinematography. In addition to liking the cinematography of Black Magic Craft, I also really enjoy the videos where Jeremy is just experimenting to see if something works. It feels very personal, almost like it's like one part vlog and one part crafting instructional. I love it. So many of his videos feel like he's taking you on a ride with him. And frankly, I don't know what the destination is, but I'm always gonna jump on that train wherever he wants to go.
Doomkin are the elite warriors of the Cult of the Dragon, armed with Doomkin scarabs, allowing them to dominate their targets who answered only to the wearers of purple.
Wyloch's Armory is a crafting channel that makes D&D things, and he also paints stuff. We're once again running into the problem that I have zero experience with this community and have no idea what the correct vocabulary is to explain what these channels do. Wyloch does some really neat stuff with taking specific modules and dungeons and like crafting them into a physical board. He's also done stuff with like painting and creating iconic monster pieces and stuff, like especially bosses from different modules. I think that's really cool. He's got this long, like I think it's like 10 parts long series on creating every single room of the Tomb of Horrors, and I gotta say, it's really impressive to watch this whole dungeon come alive like you've never seen it before. DM's Craft is another very well-made and very polished channel. In my mind, what's special about this channel is when he makes some of the really oddball stuff that you would never see on other crafting channels. Most of it is D&D focused, but some of it is not, and it's just cool. I recently read Remina from Junji Ito, and I was surprised to see that DM's Craft had actually created the monster from Remina, as a model. If you're a Junji Ito fan, you should definitely make that video your next stop after finishing this one. You won't regret it.
The idea with this build and the dungeon/building tiles that I plan to follow at some point was to make a set of terrain to suit the more elegant evil factions.
As already established, I am not in any way a crafter. However, this particular channel is basically the only one of the bunch that makes me just actively have to fight myself to not attempt to make the things he's making because they look so cool. This man is a magnet master. A magnet master. Everything he makes is modular, and they all snap in with each other. And all of these little things he's making, he makes them all separately, but they all snap together. All of his different projects can snap together. I don't know why that's so cool to me, but it's all modular. I love modularity, and I can't comprehend why I love modularity. You know what? I didn't actually do too much research in the last video about animation and comedy because I kind of assumed I already knew all the big boys. Don't worry, I already know the big channels. There's no way any huge Leviathan channels have escaped my notice.
Some people say that it's a good idea to take a traitor die or something and just like destroy it, like have like a public execution in front of the other dice, but I find that fear is only a short-term solution and it really just plants the seeds of more drastic dissent down the line.
Zee is one of the best D&D channels that I never knew existed. Zee's flagship is the animated spellbook series. He explains various spells and abilities from 5th edition and how to use them, all of it in an animated and easy to watch format. But he also covers more general topics or just his opinions on things, but you know, the way he does his animation and tells a story, just no matter what he's talking about, you're gonna have a fun time. Great animate, mate. I rate 8 of 8.
Sips kind of like stands there, and first of all, he's drunk, so he doesn't really realize what just happened, but the player next to me definitely knows what just happened.
Dingo Doodles. I don't know how I didn't know about this channel. It's another gigantic one. And as far as I'm able to tell, she's the only person, like at least that I'm aware of, that's putting out like a long form animated D&D story that you can keep up with. There might be some other creators doing it, but I don't know about them at this time. The story begins when Dingo's character, a sentient monkey named Sips, accidentally summons a world-ending monstrosity during a game of karaoke. And the stories only get weirder from there.
Before we start the next game, let's take a look at that prize pool.
Are you guys really gonna subject yourself to all this senseless death and violence just for some free dice?
Duh.
Yeah. Man Shorts. Another great channel that the algorithm never showed me. Man Shorts does weekly comedy sketches that are consistently good. Their long-running, what would you call it? Their edition series? I don't know if that's what they would call it. Anyways, it's a really good format, and it consistently is able to put out funny concepts for you to watch week to week. Guide channels. Now, this is kind of the bread and butter of D&D Tube, and I completely understand that most people don't need like 30 guide channels in their life, but perhaps if we get a broad view of the community, you can find the right guide channels for what you need.
Oh man, this one is an old one actually. You can see some food stain, maybe coffee there.
I was aware of WASD 20 for my last video, but I'd never really looked all that hard into it because that category was very much already full, like right from the get-go. However, I have now looked further into this channel, and I have discovered that it is not just an ordinary guide channel. Do you like maps? I like maps. Do you know who likes maps more than you and I put together? WASD 20. He makes a bunch of Dungeon Master guides and stuff, but I think it's pretty clear that maps are his real passion, and it shows in his content. So go check him out, you little viewer, you.
I kind of think in terms of magic items, particularly the really powerful ones, who would be making them? And I was thinking, I think that it's more likely that most of these magic items are probably getting pumped out by liches, because they're the only ones who could live long enough to actually make these things, probably the only ones who are powerful enough to create them, and they're probably the only ones who have enough resources to do it.
How to D&D puts out a big variety of guides, some of them DM-oriented or others player-oriented. Sometimes he covers different modules or world building or items and classes, ultimately just a big variety of guides to choose from. No matter who you are going to find something that's of use to you in this channel. For my money, I really like his DM Roundtable Talks where he brings in a whole bunch of creators from around the space. If you want to meet a whole bunch of content creators that I can't even touch on in this video because there's so many already, then you should go watch his DM Roundtables. So take a look at How to D&D for not only a great variety of guides, but also a great variety of guests. Next up, I have two channels that kind of cover the same topic, so I'm gonna lump them together. However, they both handle it in a slightly different way, which is what we're gonna talk about.
So the box sets often included a free module to help new Dungeon Masters run their first adventure. The first of these modules was In Search of the Unknown, an adventure that left many elements up to the Dungeon Master to customize. It was replaced with The Keep on the Borderlands, which remained the packaged module for D&D Basic until 1983.
Usually I write adventures that are site-based, like where the characters are going to a location ultimately to explore it, but this one is going to be a series of events that unfold over the course of one night.
Both of these channels do walkthroughs and analyses of published adventure or campaign modules. However, as I said, both of them do it a little bit differently. DMItAll delivers the information in a sort of well-polished video essay format. It's very clean, very nice to watch and look at. I love video essays, so, go check it out. This channel's definitely for me. Arcane Library, on the other hand, is a little bit more personal in its presentation. Not only is Kelsey there directly in front of the camera, but she also wrote this module herself. Thank you very much. If you're in the market for an adventure or campaign module, I honestly think you should watch some of Kelsey's content because, as I said, this is her stuff. And I really appreciate when she gives you like a full walkthrough of what you're going to be getting if you grab one of her modules. So that's really cool.
Adding alternate objectives is such a huge thing and such a fun thing to do to make the combat not just some slog or a damage race.
Yo, apparently I got distracted when I was writing my script and I actually forgot to add Dungeon Coach, so my apologies, this part will be purely voiceover. Dungeon Coach is one of those channels that I think is absolutely killing it. D&D Tube is a little bit saturated, especially in the guides area, but I honestly think that Dungeon Coach still manages to stand out from the crowd. For starters, everything about his channel shows a high degree of polish in terms of his excellent presentation and set dressing. The coach clearly has a lot of passion for teaching the ins and outs of D&D and homebrew, and man does he deliver. He also covers a lot of analyses on the varying mechanics and stuff that's going on behind the scenes in Critical Role, so if you've ever been curious about what's going on under the hood of Mercer's games, Dungeon Coach can make it happen.
However, to just see an Oblex and kill it in a traditional combat encounter would be such a waste of its gifts. So what if your players never needed to actually see it to get a lot out of it?
I really like this channel. The bread and butter is finding neat little creatures and monsters and stuff, and designing cool encounters that you can use those creatures in. It's really fun. It kind of feels like you and he are building an encounter together at the same time. Like he's building his encounter, and based off of the information he gave you about the monster, you're probably coming up with your own different encounter in your head. It feels very much like a shared experience. At least that's what I get out of it. You might just want to take the actual adventures he's designing. Whatever it is that you get out of it, I'm sure you're gonna like this channel. Now, this category is essentially my biggest slipping point from my last video, because I'm a forever DM. I didn't even know that player-focused channels existed. Look, I give serious kudos to players when they even bother to read the rulebook. What, you guys have players that are doing extracurriculars? Where are you finding these people?
It's a perfect kind of sidearm for any ranger or rogue that they'll use right away when they find it at low levels of play, but probably keep it as a beloved weapon all the way up to level 20, because who doesn't love rolling advantage on initiative?
The Dungeon Dudes, the Crypt Companions, the Vault, Buddies. I don't know how I convinced 500 of you to subscribe to me. The Dungeon Dudes are a big deal in the community. They're well known, they're well respected, and they always give great guides and advice. They do interviews, they do news, they do module coverage, homebrew, all sorts of stuff. Most of their non-collaborative content is very player-focused and is aimed specifically at like class guides. Now, one of the things that I really like about this channel is that all of the information is presented by two people, of course, which makes it very conversational. It's very clearly scripted, so it's not a conversation. However, it feels like one when you're listening to it. It takes a really good writer to make this scripted information sound like a conversation.
Relentless Endurance, let's face it, like that, you know, if you get dropped, you go to 1 hit point. Instead, that is totally Wolverine when he's like, "Where you going, bud? I'm not done with you yet," after he just gets his ass handed to him. That's a total Wolverine thing.
Look, I pointed out the scripting thing with the Dungeon Dudes, but that was a mistake, because now your brain is just going to be focused on like, is this scripted or is this a real conversation? I can't tell anymore. This is basically the manual breathing mode of YouTube viewership. Nerdarchy is a mostly player-oriented channel that focuses a lot on player builds. Sometimes it's to create builds to match pop culture characters, or other times it's just to make something really strong. Nerdarchy, much like the Dungeon Dudes, is conversational, thus making it extremely easy to listen to. Nerdarchy is the lo-fi of systems mastery. Chill hop builds to destroy your DM's sanity too.
Now, the second level spell is automatically Misty Step. That's not a problem. Misty Step is a good spell. And what's more is, although Misty Step is a Warlock spell, it's a spell I tend not to take with Warlocks. Or at least if I do, I take it for a couple levels and then I drop it. Because once my pack slots get to 3rd, 4th, 5th level, I don't want to be spending 5th level spell slots to cast Misty Step.
Listen, at least half my players watch these videos, so if I was playing a 5e game, I would not be putting Treantmonk on my list just to save my own sanity. However, fortunately, I'm currently playing a Pathfinder 2nd Edition game, so I am free to release this radical insurgent onto your games, and I don't have to worry about it. Look, no one on YouTube is min-maxing as hard as Treantmonk. Nobody is. So if that's your thing, this is your guy. So take a little look at Treantmonk stuff, but if your DM asks, you didn't hear about him from me. Also, you should probably only watch his channel with a Tor browser, because if his builds aren't criminal now, they will be soon.
Now, 3.5 isn't the real average of Hex. We need to find it. A level 1 Warlock with 16 Charisma versus a creature with 13 AC. The chance to hit is 65%. So the average of that Hex alone then becomes 2.27 damage.
Alright, okay. Deep breath. We're gonna tone it down. You're not looking to destroy your DM's sanity, but you do kind of want a little bit of the math and strategy behind whether certain spells and abilities are good or not. Well, I have a channel that meets exactly that niche, and it's called Pack Tactics. He's got a ton of guides about specific things in the game, and he usually shows you the math, which is cool to see. Also, he's a glorious bagpiper as well, and this is why I love YouTube. Where else would you find systems mastery and bagpipes in one video?
We as homebrewers are trying to expand the palette of character creation for D&D 5e, and as a DM, I know especially getting into this game, it can be a little difficult to figure out, is this class going to be okay? You get a little bit of anxiety thinking about like, I don't know, is this going to mess up my game? Yada, yada, yada.
We're now outside of the realm of systems mastery, and we're looking a lot more at just like good player-focused tips and content. Indestructoboy is an indestructible boy who reviews stuff, ranks stuff, and generally just makes good player-focused content about stuff. This channel also covers homebrew things, so you can double check with his channel if it's balanced before bringing it to your DM. Miscellaneous YouTube channels. What do they know? Do they know things? Let's find out.
Now, before we dive into the questions themselves, there are a couple of things that you need to cover to set up for the best campaign check-in possible. First, and most importantly, the check-in needs to be an open and honest conversation. You and the players need to feel comfortable enough putting all of it on the table and airing any problems you have.
Let's start with a YouTube channel that is actually miscellaneous. Icarus Games describes itself as GM tips, world building, maps, and more. And let me tell you, I believe that the most important part of that tagline is and more. I love that kind of content because it means that the creator can focus on the things that he's passionate about every week and doesn't have to force himself to talk about the same thing he always does. And that whole policy really shines through in Icarus Games. New releases, homebrews, world building, what it's like on the other side of the camera for a D&D YouTuber. He'll talk about whatever interests him, and I love that.
Frost Giants are instead raiders that take everything they need from others. When a blizzard sets in on an unsuspecting village, that's when you'll hear the Frost Giants' war horns. And they don't target the coins and useless baubles, they instead go straight for the inns and taverns, meat and ale. They'll also target a smithy's collection of iron and steel.
Steely Sam is a lore channel that delivers lore in YouTube short form, thus solving the greatest criticism of lore videos, that they are very long-winded. He is in the middle of blowing up to an unprecedented degree right now, so you can attempt to not subscribe to him right now, but he will be in your recommendeds very soon.
We don't know what this means, but speculation turns to their own virtual tabletop, which has been foreshadowed, or a marketplace to support it. So I'm not entirely sure what this means. There's a lot of variability here, right? It could be for them. Now, they already have a games kind of wing of the house that made Baldur's Gate, or whatever it was, Dark Alliance, which obviously didn't go over very well.
Nerd Immersion is run by a man who has never heard of sleep, and we can't tell him about it now if we want him to keep up this rate of coverage. What blows my mind about Nerd Immersion is that not only does he find the time to deliver you every last scrap of Wizards of the Coast news, but he also still has some time left over to make guides and do interviews. I had this moment when I was researching this video and I first clicked on Nerd Immersion, and I just completely froze up because I saw that he did an interview with Tracy and Laura Hickman, and that is mind-blowing. If you're new to the hobby, you may or may not know who those two are. They are some of the two driving creative forces between the Dragonlance novel series. These two and their worlds they were building basically were my adolescence. So my message to Nerd Immersion is, great work, son. I'm proud of you.
Roll me a perform check. Of course I accidentally give like the hardened military veteran the Squidward voice without even realizing it. Like, SpongeBob, we were just kids and they sent us to war. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of the men I killed.
We had a little Reddit farm subcategory in the last video, but there's a good one that I didn't know about. As stated in my last video, what I want from a Reddit farmer is I want some personality to shine through. I want the creator to be able to add some value to the stuff they're reading. And let me tell you, if you want opinions, Den of the Drake has a lot of them, and you are going to listen to them. Den of the Drake is extremely opinionated about the stories he is reading, and he is not in the slightest bit afraid to share those opinions with you. I like this stubborn Drake. You might too. Listen, I love small channels. These are the future mega channels of tomorrow. There's a ton of unknown talent who are also doing a lot of innovative things that the D&D YouTube community hasn't caught on to yet. So my message to these small channels is, hey, when you're inevitably running D&D games on your personal moon base you bought with YouTube money, don't forget me.
So we have the gelatinous cube today. This is a large CR2 ooze. It's probably one of the most unique monsters. I mean, it's definitely one of the most iconic monsters, but even just from a design standpoint, it's probably one of the most unique monsters in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons.
Pro DM is a channel that really frustrates me because it's really good and the algorithm has betrayed them. It's a DM tips channel that can easily keep up with the advice you're going to get from bigger DM tips channels. He's been doing this for ages, so he's got a big backlog of stuff for you to go check out. Some of which is actual play content, if that's your thing. I really like his monster redesign streams. I know this isn't a streamer list, but you know, this is one of those people who kind of blurs the lines between streamer and YouTuber. But either way, I really enjoyed watching him rebuild the gelatinous cube just on the fly. That was cool. I really think the YouTube algorithm has held this channel hostage. So if a few dozen of us hike on over, I bet you we can kickstart things and get this thing going again.
Let's talk about what to do, not if, but when your game goes awry. Part 1, The Tragedy of Adam Kobo the Woke.
Pixie's Grove is a very new and extremely promising little channel. She's still in those early kind of uploads, so I don't want to put her in too fine of a box saying this is what her channel does and doesn't do. I'm just going to tell you what she's done so far. So far, what Pixie's given us is some character building advice that I found to be very useful and actionable, and she's also talked a lot about consent in gaming. She also does a full breakdown of Adam Koebel and the whole controversy that happened with him, and how DMs can prevent such situations from occurring in their own game, or how they might recover or salvage the situation once trouble has begun. Pixie and I have chatted a little bit at this point, so she has told me her intention right now is to put out a few more videos that go into like world building and plot and stuff like that. So listen, Pixie is going places. So if you want to get in on the ground floor of this thing, hike on over to Pixie's Grove.
When you use Reckless Attack, it is actually a good thing for enemies to target you. And by making it so that your attacks have, or any attacks that get against you have advantage, that gives the enemies an incentive to attack you. A lot of players, and apparently quite a few DMs, don't understand that the second half of Reckless Attack is intentional. It's not meant to be a limiting factor.
Trainer Jodie is another channel who has largely been abandoned by the algorithm, despite the fact that he's been delivering fantastic DM advice for basically forever. Jodie seriously knows his stuff, and I really enjoy the videos where he's doing these like one-sided debates with Matt Colville. That's good stuff. I like that. Jodie, if you end up watching this video, you should consider expanding that series, and you should do like reaction videos to content you know you're gonna disagree with and have like debates with those people. That sounds really fun. I can't speak for the rest of the internet, but I think that's some good content. I would watch that.
The new Unearthed Arcana is titled Travelers of the Multiverse and introduces playable versions of the following creatures from classic Spelljammer: Autognomes, Gif, Hadozi, Plasmoids, and Thri-kreen. So anyone wanting to play one of these classic races can do so right now, with the free rules available at the Unearthed Arcana section of the Wizards of the Coast website.
UnimportantHero is a longtime gamer who has taken on the mantle of being the keeper of the Spelljammer setting on YouTube. If you don't know what Spelljammer is, which I didn't, Spelljammer is an old setting for Dungeons & Dragons that has been discontinued for, I think, about 20 years now. It's kind of like D&D in space. And our very important hero here is not only curating a lot of that old information, but also homebrewing ways that you can play Spelljammer in 5th edition. Even if the setting doesn't sound like it's your thing, you might just be interested in hearing some of the history of where the game used to be. So go check out Unimportant Hero.
We're going to define what we mean by that, discuss the history of bioessentialism, and talk about how the concept rears its ugly head in fantasy and Dungeons & Dragons, and discuss if it even matters when dealing with fiction.
LegalKimchi does D&D video essays. That is so cool. Literally, when I was starting this channel, I was really struggling with the decision on if I wanted to do variety content or D&D video essays. And I'm glad I didn't choose D&D video essays because LegalKimchi is way better at it than I would have been. LegalKimchi's channel is going to blow up as soon as people figure out what's going on here. This is the content that this community needs. He's used his platform to give trans creators a bit more of a voice and to explain their relationship with the hobby. He's talked about things like bioessentialism and whether or not D&D has racist elements in it. I think these topics are extremely important. He is right on the cusp of 1,000 subs. I think we can get him over. That is my only goal for this video, is just to push LegalKimchi over 1,000. We can do it. Go check out his channel, go subscribe. We can make this happen. Wait, he's a lawyer? I disavow. This never happened. This never happened. That was a lot of channels, so I'm not gonna drag out my ending here. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I won't be doing a part 3 of this series because I really do want to move on to streamers next. However, I will probably do a yearly updated list, so like a yearly D&D YouTube guide. I think that's going to be the way this is going to go. So if I miss some of your favorite people, you know, they could be on it next year. Okay, I have a mountain of editing to do for this video, so I'm going to take off. So until next time, like and subscribe and support small creators, and I love you, and goodbye.